Hey, folks, welcome back to More Than a Refresh. Today we have Nikki Barua. Nikki, introduce yourself a bit.
Thanks for inviting me to the show, JD. So I'm someone who has dedicated my entire life to helping people and organizations transform. And that transformation, whether it's been the result of technology change or business changes, it's really about helping them adapt to the uncertainty, the risks, the changes in the environment, and reinvent for a better future. Serial entrepreneur, built multiple businesses, author and keynote speaker, travels around the world, and I'm thrilled to be part of the show.
Well, thank you so much. So when you reached, you said transformation, and we're in a transformative time
Mm-hmm.
with AI. And I think, if it's all right, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that because we've had some interesting developments. I'm sure you read about the Anthropic issue
Mm-hmm.
with the U.S. government, and obviously we also have market shifts that we have to adapt for. So where's your mind at with all of this?
Well, look, like any new innovation and any new shift, there's a lot that happens until the dust settles. And, sometimes the technology is ahead of policy. Sometimes the policies are necessary for the technology to be developed responsibly. And in the midst of all of this, every organization and business is trying to make sense of it all. Leaders are trying to make decisions with the ground shifting beneath them. And right now, a lot of people in the workplace are trying to determine what does this look like for the future? What does it mean for their livelihood? Um,
So
so,
sorry, what is it that you're seeing? You touched on something, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you said
yeah,
people are wondering what it looks like in the future, and I certainly have my own opinions,
yeah.
being a technologist. But what is it that you're seeing with the organizations that you work with in regards to that?
Yeah, for a lot of large companies, there's investment in the technology. It's sort of like, oh, we got ChatGPT licenses or Copilot licenses for everybody, right? They're deploying that. And then more often than not, they're seeing sort of low to sort of average adoption level, not as high as they would expect. And the bottleneck for that is not lack of excitement for AI. We have a proprietary diagnostic, and our data shows very clearly people are actually pretty excited about the
Mhm.
possibilities of AI. And most people at this point have sort of, interacted enough to say, oh, wow, this blows my mind. I'm so excited about what I can do with it. The challenge in the workplace is different, though. You know, in that, it's really rethinking what do I need to do differently in my job? Who am I in context of AI? How do I think differently with AI? Those are the kind of things that there's lack of clarity in knowing what the right answer is. And there's lack of a proper structure that allows them to shift from who they are and how they work to how they need to be working. And that's the piece that companies are still in the early stages, sort of this infancy level of figuring out how to move their workforces to become agentic.
You know, my company, Command Prompt, we're just a boutique white glove firm, and our team is obviously our clients are talking about it. They want to use it, and it comes back to something that you just said, which is they're excited, but how do we use it correctly,
Yeah.
right?
You're
I'm
probably
on.
seeing something similar in terms of, if you have access to, AI, through your workplace, a lot of people are just using it like a faster Google search, right?
Right.
It's like
And
basic prompts and let me just chat. But that's not what it looks like at a sophisticated usage level.
well, and that's how I started, right? I enjoy, I enjoy Gemini quite a bit.
Hmm.
For the advanced, it allows me to research without having to say, type in a query and then follow the links all the way down,
Hmm.
right? I can say, give me the citations so I can evaluate how I want to work with it.
Hmm.
But the flip side of this, and is the anthropic Claude,
Hmm.
right? And that to me is a game changer.
Yeah.
As someone who has moved from being down in the terminal and building code and building out systems and infrastructure and all of that, to someone who is like yourself, a keynote speaker, a writer, a mentor, those types of things. I don't get to get into the fun code stuff much anymore. And
Hmm.
I'm not that good at it anymore.
Hmm.
Right. Like any skill, you have to hone it and keep using it to keep it sharp. But Claude has enabled me to use what I know and transform it into deliverable product.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing that people of let's say, certain wisdom uh, can really excel and take advantage of, is
Yeah.
because we are not, not only are we not going to willingly do it, generally speaking, we're not really designed for it. And that's the 20-hour day,
Hmm.
right? We're not 24.
Hmm.
Um, And Claude allows us to generate a 20-hour day in an
Hmm.
hour.
Yeah. Everything you're saying, JD, is like literally you're describing my own experience and why it makes me so excited to be alive at this time. I'm a Gen Xer, and over the course of my career, I've led teams, large teams that have built very complex systems for very big companies. And yeah, there was a time where it was pretty hands-on and technical, and all
Mhm.
of that stuff. But the more you rise up, the further away you get from execution. And so even when you have an idea or you have a vision for value you want to create or a product concept that you have, it has to go through so many layers and so many levels before it can see the light of day. And by the time it
Right.
comes to life, it may not be quite what you envisioned, so you have to keep refining it until it really reflects the vision that you have. What's exciting today is that the distance between idea and execution has entirely compressed. I don't have to go from like documenting a product concept to like writing out the specs and creating the use cases and user stories and all of that, headed to one team to another team to another team. I could literally build out an MVP on my own, and the ability to do that um, is not just about less time to bring ideas to life. What it really does is capture the wisdom and the lived experience of, having seen so much in business and in life, and to be able to capture that and to have that concept come to life. It's incredibly liberating. And you can see that, now that's not a market ready product, but it does speed up what you're able to bring to life, very, very quickly. But one thing
You know,
I
it's,
will call out in that is, um, in order to operate like that and to take advantage of the capability and infinite intelligence at our disposal, you have to be someone who is deeply curious, who is brave enough to roll up your sleeves and make mistake and have a beginner's mind. And you have to be someone who's like willing to be a rookie again. That mindset is necessary to really operate like a builder.
so I'm not sure I'm going to agree on the rookie part. I find everything else I agree with, and especially your comment about MVP. Um, but as someone who gets paid to, has a company that gets paid to basically resolve MVP limitations,
Hmm.
I find that most companies are running MVP as production,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's just kind of how it happens.
Yeah.
They always call it minimum viable product, but then it ends up being minimum viable product version 24. Yeah, I mean, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the but what the curious mind, I agree with you. And what I have found is, look, I until this last month, I hadn't written probably 100 lines of code in 6 years.
Hmm.
And the reason is that the lift had no ROI.
Hmm.
I had plenty of great ideas, but I didn't are the resources I had, I didn't want to spend my own. And, company's already busy doing what the company does. So I'm not going to distract from that. Right. What something like Claude allowed me to do, and this is in the last month, I'm off grid. So I have an incomplete solar system that I have to monitor. The nature of the solar system is that, like anything, it can go up into the cloud and I can have an account. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to just be able to monitor myself. And I was able to use Claude, and this was my first project, and it took a day and a half, but I built out an complete monitoring and management platform for Victron and JBD batteries. Okay.
Right.
Uh, that day and a half then compressed, to use your term, to a couple of hours on like 4 other projects
Hmm. Yeah.
because I now understood how the product worked and how to interact with my new technical assistant,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I knew how to talk to it. I knew how to do things like make it save state, how to tell it to give me exactly what I want in terms of deliverables,
Hmm.
how to make sure it's doing unit testing, all of that type of stuff. And I think the challenge for AI, there's one that's we've talked about a little bit, which is, there's governance that we would have to talk about. But in terms of the employee or the team member, I think the challenge is that the younger generation is actually going to struggle more than us because it's the most valuable. It has the most return on investment for those who already have knowledge. You can't use knowledge if
Yeah.
you don't have knowledge,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
right?
completely agree. I think, and we see that, when you combine, and at Flipwork, we call it the people squared framework. The people squared model is essentially combining your creativity and your contextual wisdom and multiplying that with agentic scale. When you do that, you're sort of becoming exponentially capable. That's what makes you people squared. But that means that you do have contextual wisdom. That means you have, that institutional knowledge and the judgment and the decision making that comes from thousands and thousands of reps. You've made the mistakes, you've learned the hard way, you've
Right.
figured it out. And that's what gives you that edge, which, someone who's just starting out their career is not going to have that. But what is important, though, and I've seen this with senior leaders that are at the top of their game, and that's why I think having a rookie mindset is important. You don't have to be a rookie who knows nothing, but you do have to have the explorer mindset to say, I don't have to be fixed in saying I know it all, because that can be dangerous. Because you're
Mhm.
operating off an old playbook that where the rules have changed, and we're all discovering which rules have changed. How have they changed? So if you go in with this mindset of I know it it can be a very dangerous trap. So you have to go from, all knowing to always learning. And if you have that curious, open mind where you have a beginner's mind and you're willing to say, okay, I have not done this before. Yes, I have lots of years of experience and wisdom that I can draw from. But in this specific area, I'm kind of learning it for the first time. And I'll learn it faster because I'll make better decisions, or I'll be able to, source from real experiences and all that. But there's still a competency development that's happening. Sort of like your first time was X number of days, then it became X number of hours. And there's things
Right.
that you start to get better at by doing. And it's, and the risk for executives in particular is that a lot of learning about things happens through briefings. You're an executive, you're paid to make decisions, and you get your direct reports to brief you. Give me a briefing on this next thing. Well, if you're still getting briefed on AI, but you've never actually built your own system or you've never actually interacted with it, there's something different between understanding versus feeling. That intuitive feel that you start to get when you get your hands dirty, that is a necessary part of the competency development in AI.
You know, the curiosity or explorer mindset, um, I like yourself, I know a lot of executives, and it's funny because you said they make decisions on briefing, and you're absolutely right. If you give me an hour's worth of information, I'm gonna be annoyed,
Mhm.
right? Because I've gotta make a decision, so you need to give me my key points and the pros and cons, and you need to let me think about it, make my decision, and move on. Um, but what there's something that catches my eye here, lots and lots, and I'm curious about your experience with this. There's a certain point you reach in your career where you say to yourself, "If it isn't broke, don't fix it." Well, here's the problem. With AI now, 5 years ago, no. 2 years ago, no. But now and moving forward, everything's broke.
Mhm.
You have to be willing to fix it. You have to be willing to say to yourself, okay, yeah. I mean, if we're talking from a sales perspective, we've had static margins of 10% for 10 years. Why would we want to change that? Because AI is going to make those static margins 5% or
Mhm.
2%. So you have to adapt. So instead of 10, you're getting 15 or 20,
Mhm.
right? And if you're a leader that has gotten to a point where you're not willing to adapt, it's now time to consider retiring.
Mhm. Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that, and I've had conversations with executives about exactly that, um, are not quite at retirement age, but are also questioning whether they have it in them to really, flip the old way to a new way and have to learn everything new and frankly operate in a risky environment where their hard-earned status and power could be disrupted, right? I mean, you're operating in a whole new zone. So you're not guaranteed the same kind of success you might have had in the past. And so if you're unsure whether you can navigate through, you're actually better, opting out of it than continuing to lead the ship and risk everybody else that's depending on you. One thing, based on what you shared, I'd say that um, the most important principle I truly believe that every leader has to embrace is disrupt yourself before you get disrupted. If you are waiting for things to actually show up in the data, it's probably already too late. This is a catalytic event. It's, the greatest disruption in modern human history, but it's also the greatest opportunity. I mean, this isn't the same as just using like a new version of a CRM or an ERP system. And it's like, oh, great, we have a little bit more automation and efficiency, and we're going to bring in the consultants, we'll train our people, and everything's all good. And you have a manual to report. I mean, we've all done those kind of programs before, right? This is not it.
Mhm.
This is very different in that you're not just learning the system, you're teaching it. And you can't teach it if you don't really understand its power and you don't understand your role in the context of that power. And to do that right, you have to see it as a catalyst for complete reimagination of every aspect of the business. You mentioned the 10% margin going to 5%. Think about law firms. If your whole business
Mhm.
model was built on billing by the hour, and now the latest version of Claude or Harvey or something can do all of that work, why would your clients still honor the same bill rates? You have to fundamentally reimagine the business, not just use the automation or the tools. That requires rethinking every aspect of the business. But that's, I think, where the real opportunity lies too.
So there's 2 parts here. I wanna get to the law firm because it's actually something that I've honed in on, that's gonna change quite a bit,
Hmm.
as well as, healthcare administration. But one of the things you said was, you're not quite retirement age, okay, and you're just not sure yet, right, if you wanna go through this. Well, I'm 53, I'm also a Gen Xer. And when this hit hard, not when it first showed up, not the Chat GBT, fanboy stuff, when people
Hmm.
started to
Yeah.
really do stuff with this, I questioned myself. I'm like, "Look, I'm an old database guy. Do I really want to go through this again?" My answer to every executive, every leader, every manager who at one point was an entrepreneur, right? Because I'm not an entrepreneur anymore. I've been doing this for 30 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at one point I was hungry all the time. And I don't mean food wise. I mean for new information, new opportunity, new ideas, all that stuff. What I would say to every executive that was once in that realm, take 4 days off and hang out with your best friend, Claude.
Mm-hmm.
Do your research, build your MVPs, fail, and then fail again, and then succeed and see what you are actually still capable of that you didn't think you still had in you. And it's because of these tools. All of a sudden, we have a tool that takes all of our wisdom, puts it down into that crystal ball, and helps you organize it and deliver something new.
Yeah.
Right? The law firm argument is powerful because I think we're going to end up seeing we're going to see. Are you? I'm sure you are. You're aware of like LegalZoom?
Yeah.
Okay. So those that aren't aware, LegalZoom, you go, you say, I need to incorporate, I need a will, any number of various legal documents, and they charge you $2.99 and it's done. Well, that's as AI starts to distill itself down into specific domains, that's what we're going to see with legal.
Yeah.
Instead of having, a dozen paralegals doing all the write-ups and then a lead paralegal distilling it down into one paper for argument and then an attorney that reviews for approval, there's going to be one paralegal and one attorney and AI.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the downside, that's great because my attorneys are like $900 an hour. Right? I don't even want to call them. So, but having the ability for the attorney will just say, this is a flat fee. Unless I have to travel, go to court, whatever, it's, you're going to pay, it's going to go to a subscription model, right? $9.99 a month, and we'll just take care of all your stuff. But I think is going to be an unfortunate situation is that power is also going to fall into the hands of the just slightly intelligent.
Yeah.
And we're going to see a rush of lawsuits, right? Because people are going to be like, this person upset me and hurt my feelings. So I'm going to go to Claude and I'm going to tell Claude to write up my legal brief and give me the instructions to file it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in any society that's already litigious,
we're not at all.
And when the barriers to more litigation drop even further, it's bound to happen because you're just, then it's like gambling, right? You might as well try. What if you win the lawsuit and you end up with a settlement, right? You got so little to lose. One of the reasons why people didn't engage in litigation is because it's so damn expensive. At least pre-AI, it was so expensive. And now if those things don't happen, there's no limits to number of notices and things like that you can set. But in any domain, I think what we will start to see happen is that the highest quality professionals and the experts will become exponentially more valuable because all it's going to do is flatten the average, where average is nearly free. And so if you're operating at the level as a professional of any kind, it doesn't matter whether you're a technologist or a lawyer or, management expert of any kind. If you're just an average player, a lot of your work, a machine could theoretically do most of or produce output that looks like that. But if you're really talented and you bring something unique to the table, that starts to look more and more valuable. And I think there's a disproportionate gain that people have. And we see that in engineering as well, right? The ones that are really talented engineers, their output is 100x more, not just 10x more than the average player. And even in fields like legal, we'll start to see that. The best legal minds, the best litigators, they'll become so much more valuable simply because Claude will not be able to produce the same kind of output.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. It's actually something I coined as the end of the veneer generation.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is for the past 15 years or so, we have been in this generation where fake goes a lot farther than and has more value than what it really does. Well, and using your term, we're flattening the average.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen, which also applies into the whole you need knowledge to use knowledge. If you flatten the average, your average programmer is no longer a programmer.
Mm-hmm.
They're a quote unquote prompt engineer. That's all they do,
Yeah.
right? And then if you're not at least that, you need to stay away from this industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we also went through a period where people started to go into computers, internet programming, because it was a safe job.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer a safe job unless, and that unless is exactly what you said, is you're going to have to be above average.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to have to be at least somewhat exceptional.
Yeah.
In whatever domain you're in. If you're not, and even what a lot of people don't even see yet is that the exceptional isn't necessarily going to be your physics or math capability. It's going to be your ability to connect on the human level while having the physics and math capability. And that's a big challenge for a lot of science-minded folks.
Yeah, it is. But it also separates the ones that operate across domains. I think of them as E-shaped builders, that kind of bring the experience and the expertise, but have that curious mind to keep exploring and learning different things. Your ability to see things and connect dots across intersections, that becomes a superpower. Because you can, you sort of it's the age of the polymath, right? You're able to bring so many different dimensions, but then your unique taste and perspective shapes kind of how, that translates into outcomes that only you can produce or perspectives that only you have. That is overall a really good thing for society for two separate, very different reasons. And this is something that I personally feel really passionately about. I don't think the industrial age did humanity a great service. Yes, it moved us forward, from farms to factories, but it also put us in these pyramid hierarchies of level after level of management and 9-to-5 jobs and cubicles with beige carpeting and, where we just were doers of tasks. It put us all of human potential and put us into production, human doings instead of human beings, And today, when I think about what is possible now, yes, it's taken that away. So if you're someone who feels most secure in your job, when you have a clear job definition, when you have a 9-to-5 operating cycle and you just process input and output and get stuff done, yes, it's going to feel very threatening. But on the flip side, if you think of it as the liberation of humanity, to be creative and to use our imagination and to operate across domains and produce value that was never possible before, that's the great unlock.
So it's interesting. I'm when it comes to the industrial age, it really is a mixed bag, right? It just like anything, but the mixed bag is what you said. It created a situation where people became resources, not assets, right? Now, here's the catch. We wouldn't be where we are right now having this discussion without that unfortunate demonstrative, that what happened.
Yeah.
Right? So while, yes, we absorbed and used and bled out all these resources, the end game is we are now here and we now have, just like you said, the opportunity for humanity to regain not only its creativity, which I agree with, but its integrity.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, anybody, not anybody, but anybody with the gift has the opportunity to play on a football field that they never even could have walked on before.
Yeah.
Right. It's not necessarily about how much money your mom and dad loaned you to start that business. right, is not necessarily about VC or indebting yourself. It is actually, in this day and age, often going to be about the idea itself,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Is the idea that is going to present the opportunity on a much wider scale. But then we have to deal with the side effects of that. I mean, what do we do? I mean, you can see it in, say, like the Android store,
Hmm.
right? How many farming simulators do we need? Right. So, and that's where, I was talking about the veneer generation is
Hmm.
expiring. We're going to see, because of AI, we're going to see a lot of things that society isn't ready for. And frankly are probably wrong, but are going to happen anyway. For example, social scores.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, Google's already doing this with their algorithm. They're already leaning hard into, we are trying to detect whether or not it's an actual human producing original content
Hmm.
that has more value within the index.
Yeah.
That's a social score.
Hmm.
Um, how do we, I mean, with what do you think that your group of people, how are you going to deal with that?
Yeah. I think to me, this becomes truly a philosophical and in some ways a spiritual choice. When you're freed of the drudgery, and there's so many different ways for you to apply your talent, your intellect, your skills. Um, it requires a high, someone of high agency and integrity to say, in what ways do I want to contribute? If I'm free to contribute in any way, and I don't have to follow a traditional path that existed for decades, how might I apply myself? Because the moment that forces a level of brutal honesty to say, what is my zone of genius? Really, like, what is my true zone of genius? What is it that I was born with or passionate about, or I'm willing to, dedicate myself to for a long period of time, no matter what the risk or the struggle in that process is. When you're forced to look at yourself that way and say, oh, now how do I take that zone of genius and co-evolve with AI as my partner, and how does that get unlocked to become, an exponentially capable human being? And in what ways do I create value? Um, to me, that's the piece that I see as such a gift that didn't exist before. I mean, that's what you're describing in how you feel unlocked and all the things you couldn't do before. But that's available to every person. The difference of the people that step into it and take advantage of that and therefore build a future that's great for them and for other people versus those that don't is going to be a matter of courage.
Man, Nikki, if you didn't come across as an inspirational keynote speaker, you do now. And I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's going to be, though I do believe we're going to see a greater, well, okay. So in society, you can easily hear about people being upset about, say, income disparity,
Hmm.
right? The wage gaps, things like that. Right or wrong, I mean, it's there. But one of the things that those arguments ignore is that while, yes, the wage gap is greater than it ever has been on record, quote unquote, which I actually don't agree with, because they're not taking into account the Middle Ages or Dark Ages. It's
Hmm.
just that there's more of us now. But what is true is that while, yes, the wage gap is huge, the wealth opportunity has grown at the same level.
Absolutely.
There are more people now that are affluent than ever have been, ever. Right? Even, and not even just from a per capita perspective, right? We're talking about sheer numbers of value of wealth. And when we talk about wealth, we're talking about, say, the top 15%.
Hmm.
right? There are more of those worldwide than ever before. And this is going to, I think, allow for another 10, 15% that aren't quite there to actually reach it.
Mhm.
Talk to us a little bit, okay, about flip work. What is it that you do there? I mean, you're the founder,
Mhm.
obviously, but what is the go-to market there?
Yeah. Well, before I share about flip work, I just want to comment on what you mentioned about the wealth disparity. And you know, for me personally, and this kind of leads into why flip work exists. Um, I grew up with, no resources and,
Mhm.
and came to America as an immigrant with nothing, no connections, no capital, no, you know, um, access and all of that. And in the 30 years of being in America, my life is completely transformed. And I couldn't be more grateful to have had that opportunity. And what has driven me has been, how do I pay it forward? How do I create more jobs? How do I, add to the innovation and lift other people and all of that? That was sort of your typical immigrant story of having come
Mhm.
somewhere, taking a risk and making the sacrifices and being resilient through change, and eventually you make it. So yes, I've got the typical immigrant success story. What is
Well, but you
different
also have
about
one.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to interject. I think there's one thing you have as well, if we're talking philosophically, and that's your Gen X. We're a different breed,
That's because I
right?
our parents just left us out there
Yeah,
and told us come back before the street lights come on, right?
that's it. And you know, it's funny you bring that up because people are like, that never happened. Yes, that's exactly what happened. They're
Yeah.
like, leave. And if you think it's poisonous, have your friend drink it first just to check, right?
Yeah.
And be home when the lights come on, right?
Yeah, I mean,
But
gosh, I think you and I both probably have so many Gen X stories that like sound like total child abuse to anyone now. You know?
but agreed. It does, but the thing was, is it wasn't. I would say it may have bordered on neglect, but it
Yeah.
certainly wasn't abuse because it gave us the backbone to push through that we have.
Yeah. Well,
And
you
while
when you are
no, go
just
ahead.
you're kind of just figuring things out and you're unafraid of the unknown and you think of it as an adventure, right? Like it's kind of
Hmm.
like, oh, look, I didn't tell my parents where I was going and I ran off with my friends and I did something crazy and there were no cell phones to track you and no way to find out about anything, right? So you just kind of build a street smart kind of mindset and muscle around it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that upbringing certainly helped me even as an immigrant coming to a brand new place where I knew nothing and building up my career here. But the connection to me of what AI offers today is that y- you can bring any kind of dream to life. You don't need millions of dollars of capital. You don't need, to be a trust fund baby. You don't need to have, access to famous people that'll open doors for you. There's so much that is actually possible for you to achieve than was ever possible before. And to me, that's a huge sort of loss if you don't recognize that simply by having a big dream and operating with high agency and a great sense of ownership and accountability, you can make your dreams come true. You can truly do that today. And I see this as like the golden age of entrepreneurship. I think a lot more people, if they take advantage of this, will pursue their dreams and, build the kind of businesses that, allow them to live on their terms.
And I think on the flip side of that, we are going to see some pushback. And I'm not talking about the people that are complaining about AI in the sense of, this is AI slop or whatever. There's going to be pushback from the people that like the hierarchy, that want to consume the resources versus invest in assets.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a challenge, right? And I'm pretty sure that's going to last throughout until I actually do retire, the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, I think that's the generational thing definitely playing out, but it's holding on to, on one hand, status and power that took a lot to achieve that. And you look at the top of any major company, right? The folks that made it that high up, it took a lot for them to get there. So when that gets threatened and there's a new sort of value system in place and anyone, anywhere could achieve, similar outcomes, you kind of want to hold on to that power base. And that resistance is going to be there. But I also see that over time that I'm an optimist, so I'd like to believe that that the pie simply gets bigger for everybody. We don't have to fight over the slices.
Well, and it's a mind shift, right? It's if you're about consuming resources, the pie is constrained, right? And because it's a finite amount of things to consume. If you're in assets grow.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're investing in people, you're paying it forward, and you treat people as assets that have more intrinsic worth than their bare output. Right. Their output will continue to improve and increase on the investment itself. All of a sudden, you're absolutely right. That pie will get larger.
Yeah.
And in some ways, what we're talking about is meritocracy within the professional realm.
Yeah.
Which I think is valid. But a case in point to the quote unquote established power structures that are going to be challenged, and these have been being challenged for a while now. More and more, I'm not going to say all, but more and more people really don't care that you went to Harvard or Yale or Cornell. They want to know, did you do the work? And that just might be some uni that's local, or you just spent 6 years doing it on your own. And since you did the work, can you do the work that I'm asking you to do, right?
Yeah.
And that is a breakdown of former power structures that I think is going to ripple upward.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you see it in the tech realm quite a bit.
Don't you think that's a good thing, though? Isn't it like freeing people from being stuck with not having pedigree and therefore not being able to advance? And I can speak to this personally too. I did not go to an Ivy League school, and that actually did have an impact on the early years of my career, where certain companies would only hire from Ivy League. So no matter how qualified or intelligent or capable I thought I was, I just couldn't even get an interview there. They wouldn't consider me. Today, that's no longer holding me back. And so it's almost freeing human potential from the boxes that define how that could be expressed.
So is it a good thing? I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say no. Yes for humanity, no for me. And I'll tell you why. I don't even have a high school diploma. I am a proud owner of a GED. I didn't finish college. I got fired from my last job when I was like 28 or something like that, and started Command Prompt, and everything has been, and I too am a published author and keynote speaker and international traveler and the whole bit. And I did it through my merit. I'll say no because it's competition, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I actually look forward to it. I enjoy nothing more than sitting across the table with a peer, intellectual, ambitious peer, arguing, trying to solve the world's problems, and then moving forward.
Yeah.
Right. And the more people I can do that with because of their merit, the better, hands down. Right. There's no question about that. I just find it interesting. I mean, because, what I recently did a presentation at an event at Amazon in San Francisco. And one of the things that I brought up was that we are now experiencing our railroad event. Right. This is AI in our world is what the railroad was in that world.
Yeah.
And we're going to see a lot of parallels. A lot of people, there's going to be a small number of people that get really disgustingly rich.
Mhm.
Okay. I can think of one that just happened, right? We're going to see a larger number of people become rich, but
Mhm.
not disgustingly so.
Yeah.
Right? And then we're going to see that move up for affluency. Unfortunately, like the railroads, I also think we're going to see a large number that just they don't get any farther. In fact,
Yeah.
they might even backslide.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to be a challenge, I think, for society because we're no longer in a situation where it's no longer the three F's, right? First financed, right? It's are you good enough do you have $100 a month, Claude, and are you good enough with your idea to produce it?
Mhm.
And what I think a lot of people don't understand is that this isn't just about software,
No.
right? This is about you could research process. As a contractor, help me define a new way to build decks that are code compliant, but decrease the average deck cost from 87 cents a foot to 47 cents a foot. Claude will help you do that. Right? So it's not just software. It's
Mhm.
business process, it's general knowledge, it's research.
Mhm.
At that event that I spoke at, one of the things that one company alluded to, they didn't say anything. It was one of these, just wait, right? Cancer research, right? Those types of things.
Yeah. Look, I think, you know, I truly believe that the future will be prosperous for all, that we will have abundance in society across the board, not just in the first world nations, but across the world, that we'll be able to solve humanity's greatest challenges, from disease to food to climate, all of those things, that things that we've never been able to even address because we didn't have the resources, the capacity, the budgets, that we can actually start solving those problems. And when there's lots of problems to solve, you also need lots of people to solve that. So there is opportunity that will get created over time for people to participate in that. But if I look back and say, what is it throughout history that has allowed people to participate in those opportunities? There is a level of, you know, personal accountability that does play out. You have to be
Mhm.
willing to step into that. If you're hesitating, if you're afraid, if you're unwilling to change, or you're holding on to the past, you're going to miss out. And you know, your own story, when you share, okay, you didn't go to college, but look at the life you've created. What do you think that
Mhm.
was about? It wasn't just about intellect. It wasn't just about ambition. There was something in there about the how you're wired, that you weren't willing to be defined, you know, in and put in a box, that you were defining your own destiny. And I think that it's really going to be the mindset will make a difference in who wins first and who trails behind and eventually catches up.
Well, you're absolutely right there. And for those, I know I have listeners that are like, this is just, manipulation and things like that. And what I would suggest to those people is, well, it is manipulation in a positive way, number
Yeah.
one. But if you don't think that these things are possible, ask yourself, how do you feel when you watch a show like Sons of Anarchy versus a show like Lion King?
Hmm.
Right? They're both entertaining and they both stand on their own merits for what they are, but only one of them inspires you to be good,
Hmm.
right? And it's the same with music, right? Depending on the type of music you're listening to, it will move you forward in different ways. There's a reason why some people listen to jazz when they work, some people listen to EDM when they work, that kind of thing. But the one thing you mentioned, you said you're an optimist and you think we're going to get all these great things. I noticed that you left out the one thing that is our biggest challenge. and that's humanity itself.
Mhm.
Because there is always someone that wants to take what you got. Always. They want to be better than you. For whatever reason, they want to feel like they're better than you, and they're willing to do the things that not good people do to be better than you. And I think that's our biggest challenge as we move forward, because especially when we start talking about those hierarchy, old school power structures, they're not going to want to let go. I think it's going to be, and I don't mean violence in the streets,
Mhm.
but I do think it's going to be a violent shaking of society over the next decade or so.
Yeah. Well, someone asked me at a recent event where I spoke about, what do I see as the risks of AI to society? Where will the machines become our overlords and take over, and we're all sort of beholden to AGI and all of that. And I was like, I think the bigger threat is not the AI and robots. The bigger threat is bad actors amongst us
Mhm.
who
Yes.
leverage this incredible power and intelligence to harm, your own people. And that's the bigger risk. And, but even in that, I choose to be an optimist, to believe that there's more good people that will find ways around
I
the bad
agree.
actors, and that we will still manage to keep progressing forward. Um,
Well, on that idea, I mean, just as AI helps the good and will help the good accelerate, it will also help the evil and the evil
yeah.
accelerate,
And that's why I think
right? I
governance
mean,
and guardrails are so important, but it's not just about putting those guardrails. That's why I believe a level of real competency is necessary even among senior leaders, because you can't govern and manage something that you don't deeply understand in your bones. And that's not going to happen by getting a briefing. That's going to happen by
right.
actually building
Yeah.
stuff yourself where, the light bulb goes off and you're like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand how I need to leverage this power, but also I need to protect the downside risks and empower my people the right way.
Well, I mean, you're gonna have to get your hands dirty
Yeah.
again, basically. And that's a good thing. I think it'll inspire a lot of leaders to be like, when let's take a 60-year-old. When I was 45, I wanted to do X. Or actually, let's do a pop culture reference. I assume you've seen Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Iron Man 2, he's getting poisoned by the what element that's charging his heart, right? Well, what ended up happening is that his dad solved the problem, but didn't have the technology to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
So Iron Man was able to use knowledge from 25 years ago, but now have the technology to build what his dad had
Mm-hmm.
already theorized.
Yeah.
That's the same thing we're going to see here. You're going to have to be willing to do the work, though.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to do the work, you can apply all that amazing knowledge that you have, all that amazing wisdom that you have, and build something that you've always wanted to build but couldn't
Mm-hmm.
even 10 years ago.
Yeah. So JD, this actually takes me to, what we have been seeing over and over again. And really the reason why flip work exists is that having, having worked in transformation for so long and seeing, the challenges across different industries and all of that, there was one specific pattern that always stuck with me, which is, the technology races ahead and the people get left behind. Because change
Mhm.
management is just hard, and getting people to change, not just adopting a technology and learning how to use a certain piece of software, that's one thing, that's training. But getting them to actually think different and let go of the old way and, upgrade their own operating system, if you will. That's not an easy thing to do. And historically, it's taken a long time, which is why transformation programs or change management programs used to be years long. Uh, we don't have the luxury of that kind of time with AI, right? Because if Claude, models are changing every couple of months and you're changing every 2 years, by definition, you're extremely, outdated and obsolete. And so the challenge that we kept seeing was people needed to adapt at the pace of the technology, at the pace of AI. But what is the real bottleneck that prevents them from doing that? It's not excitement for the technology. It's not the, intelligence required. This is not complicated stuff that, most people can't figure out. What we found was there was a singular bottleneck, and it was identity. How we perceive
Oh, interesting.
ourselves, and the data showed it. We have a proprietary diagnostic, and the data showed it over and over again that how we perceive ourselves and what gives us a sense of safety and security and status and power, we are unwilling to let go of that identity. And sometimes we don't even realize we're holding on to it for dear life. It's just subconscious, right? Like we're holding on to that identity that I'm a VP of marketing, I'm a director of sales, and this is how I've always done it. I'm not willing to let go of that. And as long as you don't shed that identity and realize identity is changeable, just like biology, everything changes. You can shed your identity. And when you embrace a new identity, you're willing to completely reinvent and reimagine everything. That change happens instantaneously as soon as that identity shifts.
I I did not expect this to go to identity politics. But what you're talking about here is essentially fast-paced evolution,
Mhm.
right? You have to be adaptable. It used to be that the life of an industry could be a century,
Mhm.
right? Now, industry, it's a decade.
Yeah.
And with AI, it's gonna be even less, right? Um, so the question is, how do you be first without being premature?
Mhm.
And this is what I mean by that. Um, Back in the early 2000s, during the dot-com bubble, there was a company called, I think it was called Peapod,
Mhm.
and Peapod was cool. And you'll recognize it. You went to a website, you plugged in what you wanted, and then all of a sudden, it showed up at your door.
Mhm.
Not overnight. We're not talking Amazon Prime one day. We're talking Instacart,
Mhm.
right? They went out of business in like 2 years or something like that. They were just way ahead of their time. And now obviously we do have Instacart and all these other, I don't even know what I don't use them, but I think the same is going to apply in some of these other areas with AI, but it's going to be a little inverted. Because you said, we got to worry about governance, for example. That's just what happened with Anthropic, right? All of a sudden, the US government came down and said, whoa, hold on, this is a little scary. We're going to lock this down, at
Mhm.
least for a little bit. Okay. Um, but we also have to worry about things like chain of evidence,
Mhm.
right? When all of a sudden your business is being run by software, not you using software to run your business, that software has to be accountable.
Yeah.
You have to know what it did, right? And you need to know who did it, why it did it, who it was talking to, when it did it, all those types of things.
But see,
And if you don't,
that's where I truly believe that it's the layer where only humans should live, where AI cannot operate, right? If um, it's one thing to automate the actions, or even have algorithms around decisions, but accountability is the place where humans have to operate. The ultimate accountability. When that gets delegated away, you just don't know what might happen from it, and that's the risk of when the system gets more and more intelligent and you are no longer in the loop on or being accountable for the results. That starts to get pretty dangerous very fast.
you're absolutely right. And you just touched on the one thing that humans are terrible about, and that's being accountable.
But
I
that
mean,
too, going back
when
to
you
our
take the spectrum, right?
but that too, going back to our earlier point about, it's the flattening of the average. It's also the
Mhm.
flattening of the unaccountable. I think real success will show up for humans in a whole different way now. It's not just about what degree you got or what school you went to or, what labels or titles you have. It's going to be, are you the one that not only brought something unique and valuable and original to the table, but are you also the high agency person that took accountability, made those high impact decisions, and stuck their neck out no matter what happened? If you are designed like that, that makes you incredibly valuable, because everything else a machine eventually will be able to do, and everything else gets homogenized. So there's no way to stand out unless you become that person.
So, and I agree with you. I think it's going to be a real challenge. Like you said, the flattening of it's going to be a real challenge for a lot of people, because it's going to be the risk takers who can take accountability. They're going to win,
Bingo.
right?
I think
That,
it becomes a very entrepreneurial culture. Even if you have a job, entrepreneurial spirit, all of those values that entrepreneurs historically have demonstrated, right? Like, having an original idea, having vision, having the courage to pursue it, having the tenacity and the grit and the resilience, the constant learning, the willingness to like be humble and deal with failure and take accountability and not point fingers at someone else. All of those qualities will become exponentially more valuable. And
all
it
right. So,
naturally leads to an entrepreneurial sort of spirit across the board. But that doesn't mean that everybody will cross that bridge. I think that's where the
sure.
challenge is.
I mean, there's always going to be those who are, well, like I have a team member who is absolutely, and I mean, he's brilliant. I mean, he's that scary level of brilliant, but he also says, I'm just a cog. He's not unhappy about that.
Mhm.
That's who you you have to direct him. You say, I want X, and he'll build X, he'll make X, but you've got to tell him X is what you want,
Mhm.
right? He won't just go build X on inspiration.
Yeah.
All right. So as we close out here, tell us a little bit more about flip work in a concrete way, because we want to make sure that it gets the visibility it deserves.
So Flipboard was founded to solve one specific problem, which is closing the exponential divide with AI racing ahead and humans getting left behind. And my entire career has been dedicated to helping to close the divide in different ways. And this one is really helping people take the leap from where they are to where they need to be and be successful in the AI age. And the way we do that is to not only identify, their own AI readiness. We have a diagnostic that helps to identify exactly where they are and understand their archetype. The reason that archetype matters is it helps to identify the identity that they're holding on to.
Mhm.
Because if you can identify
Okay.
what
Yeah.
is it that you perceive as valuable and unwilling to let go, then it helps to figure out, well, how do you, unlearn that part. Once we do the diagnostic, we take people through 8-week sprints. And during that time, think of it like a live lab experience where you're not just learning about AI, but you're actually building with AI. This is, as we've discussed, not something that you can get briefed on. You actually have to be a builder.
Mhm.
But it's not often easy to become a builder in a one size fits all training, or, just being given a license and saying, go build your thing. Like, most people are afraid to touch things and feel like they'll break it or do something wrong. So without the right structure and environment, they're often afraid to even try. Or if they try, they're not doing it the right way. So during that sprint, they not only go through a structured curriculum that rewires their mindset and their behavior and their thinking and their identities, but they also reinvent their workflow. So whether you're in a marketing job, a sales job, or HR job, or legal job, you're going through every step of your personal workflow and reinventing that with AI at the center. And then you're building agentic systems, you're deploying tools, you're mastering a whole new way of working. And in that 8-week period, we see people shifting from complete novice user of AI, non-technical, someone who's like almost afraid of like dealing with technology, to 8 weeks later, they're not only an agentic leader, they have an entire agentic system. And on average, people release about 40 to 50% of their capacity. So imagine having twice as much time every week.
Mhm.
That becomes the strategic decision. How do you want to redeploy that into higher value work? Does it lead to more, innovative ideas, more time with customers, more ways to like create more value in your business? But the biggest thing that happens as people go through this process is it shifts who they think they are. It's not just about the skills that they master. It's not just about the systems that they build, not just their knowledge about AI, but it fundamentally shifts their belief about themselves. And that once that's unlocked, from there, it's sort of like they get a whole new view of their life, their career, and their possibilities. And my all-time favorite story of the transformation we've seen people go through is, a senior, very senior executive who's on the board of 4 different companies in her late 60s, who actually was contemplating retirement, went through this program and came out and said, forget retirement. I've got 20 years more ahead of me, and I am filled with excitement about what I'm going to build. That's what happens when you shift your identity.
You're absolutely right. And it's interesting to see something like this come about. And I'm going to say something and understand I actually mean it in the most positive way. But it's like Anthony Robbins for executives, right?
You're not the first person who said that. Somebody who actually, went through the sprint basically says, oh my God, this is like, Tony Robbins meets like, the most advanced lab environment where I'm like building advanced systems and all of that. But instead of it just being like tinkering with systems and tools and chemicals, here I am like a Tony Robbins transformation that's happening. And I was like, well, we should just make you walk on fire too.
Well, no, it's important because he focuses more on the, like the intimate interpersonal relationship stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But that's all identity as well.
Yeah. And
right?
We do have that as part of this because what we found is, I mentioned the zone of genius, right? Like we are living at a time where you truly don't have to be beholden to whatever career your parents encourage you to pursue or whatever you chose to do because you had to put food on the table for your family. You now truly have the opportunity to reinvent and pursue anything you want. But that requires you really understanding who are you? What is the gift within you? And a lot of people, you'll be surprised to find, have no idea. Like they define themselves in terms of titles, like I'm in marketing or I'm in supply chain or seniority or even the company brand name. But if you ask them to name what is their true gift, they really don't have an idea about that. So part of this process is them being able to name that gift and actually put it to use.
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all because frankly, I don't think I can answer that question. And our CEO is National Health Board certified health and well-being coach from Duke.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's all about that. She's all about that. We need to drill down and help you figure out who you are so that, like you said, you could become high agency.
Yeah.
Right? All right, folks, this has been another More Than a Refresh with Nikki Barua of Flipwork. Nikki, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, this was such a fun conversation, JD. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.